On Christmas Day, Jacob Carter deliberately cleared his schedule to stay home with me. Feeling cheerful, I busied myself in the kitchen, preparing his favorite dish, grilled steak with creamy mashed potatoes. The warm candlelight cast a soft glow over the dining table, painting the perfect holiday scene. But just as I stepped out of the kitchen with the plates in hand, I froze. I heard his voice, speaking in German. "Baby, I can't come over tonight. I'll be there first thing in the morning." A woman's voice responded playfully, also in German. "Aren't you afraid Emily might hear you?" Jacob let out a scoff, his voice laced with disdain. "Afraid? Please. She's just a housewife who knows nothing beyond cooking and laundry. There's no way she understands." Then came the final blow. "Don't worry. Once she gives birth, I'll take the child and be with you." The plate slipped from my hands, shattering against the floor, the sharp crack cutting through the holiday stillness. The study door flung open. Jacob appeared in the doorway, his face instantly paling. "Emily, what happened?" I clenched my fist so tightly my nails dug into my palms, forcing down the tremor in my voice. "Nothing. I just felt a little dizzy." Jacob frowned and strode over, steadying me in his arms. "You've been overworking yourself lately. Come on, I'll take you to bed." I leaned into his embrace, allowing myself to sink into the familiar warmth of the man I had once trusted so completely. But his words echoed in my ears. "There's no way she understands." Jacob Carter had no idea that during my university years, I had spent a year as exchanging student abroad. In Germany. I didn't sleep at all that night. My mind spun with endless thoughts. While beside me, Jacob stirred awake. As always, he leaned in to press a morning kiss to my cheek. Only this time I turned away. His movement stalled. For a brief second, I caught the flicker of surprise in his eyes before his gaze shifted to my phone. The dim glow of the screen reflected off his face, and his brows furrowed slightly. "Good morning, sweetheart." His voice carried a hint of dissatisfaction, though it was carefully wrapped in his usual tenderness. I forced a stiff smile, nodded, and casually flipped my phone face down on the nightstand, closing the web page in the process. The homepage of one of New York's top law firms. Jacob didn't press the matter. Instead, he glanced at the time and, with practiced ease, adjusted the cuffs of his shirt, quickly regaining his usual composure. He dressed methodically, then spoke in his typical detached tone. "Emily, there's an important company gala tonight. Don't wait up for me." With that, he strode out the door. There was a time when, on mornings like this, I would have sprung out of bed to prepare his breakfast, reminding him over and over not to drink too much at the event. There was a time when his absence would have left me restless all day, worrying about whether he was eating well, whether he'd had too much to drink, whether he was truly as busy as he claimed. But now I simply lay there, exhausted, my mind replaying his words from the night before. The happiness I had clung to, the love I had believed in, had all been nothing more than a carefully woven lie. And the man who had deceived me, the one who had once sworn to love me for a lifetime, had been lying all along. I refused to accept it. Opening my social media app, I typed in Sophia Bennett. In an instant, her page loaded, filled with posts featuring Jacob. 3 years. For 3 years, all of Jacob's so-called business trips had been nothing but excuses to see her. I clicked on one of her most recent videos. Jacob sat in a cozy cafe, bathed in the golden glow of sunlight streaming through the window. His expression was gentle, his eyes filled with warmth. He reached over, ruffling Sophia's hair with a touch so tender it sent a chill down my spine. "I promised you," he said softly. "We'll always be together." My fingers turned ice cold. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Jacob. "Don't forget to eat breakfast. Take care of yourself." In the past, such messages would have made my heart swell with warmth. I would have eagerly replied with a cheerful, "Okay." But this time, I could only laugh bitterly. He had probably sent it after finishing a romantic morning with Sophia. Only then did he remember that he had a wife waiting at home. As if to confirm my suspicions, Sophia's social media updated again. A new photo. She knelt in front of a Christmas tree, carefully hanging a delicate crystal ornament. Behind her, Jacob was doing the same, his shirt slightly unbuttoned at the collar, just enough to reveal the faint trace of a love bite on his neck. Her caption read, Jacob said he wanted to give me a Christmas tree like no other. My vision blurred. So, it wasn't that he didn't understand romance, he just never cared to be romantic for me. It wasn't that he didn't like spending time together, he just never wanted to spend it with me. The memory hit me like a cruel slap. Just yesterday I had looked at him with a smile and said, "Let's get a Christmas tree this year." He hadn't even bothered to lift his head. His voice had been indifferent, almost mocking. "Aren't you a little too old for that? If you have so much free time, why not take a yoga class or something?" Yet here he was with her, decorating a Christmas tree like a love-struck teenager. The photo was a blade, slicing through whatever remained of my heart. Had he ever loved me? And if he hadn't, why had he kept me trapped in this marriage for so long? A wave of emotion surged in my chest, leaving me breathless. I sucked in a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I closed my eyes. One thought rang clear in my mind. If this marriage was a mistake, then I would make damn sure it ended now. The faint scent of antiseptic lingered in the hospital air as I sat in the waiting area, absent-mindedly running my fingers over my phone screen. My thoughts were a tangled mess. I hadn't planned on coming here. But after that phone call last night, I hadn't slept a single minute. I needed an answer, one that would force me to wake up. So, first thing this morning I booked an appointment. Since the moment I learned the truth, I had been telling myself that no matter what, this child was innocent. That I had once dreamed of building a complete, loving family. But now, sitting here, I couldn't help but wonder, was I really going to bring this baby into a life built on lies? The nurse's voice echoed down the hallway, calling my name. Taking a deep breath, I stood up and walked into the exam room. The doctor flipped through my file, then glanced up at me with a neutral expression. "Your husband's not with you today?" I hesitated for a split second before forcing a smile. "He's busy with work." The doctor nodded without further comment and proceeded with the routine checkup. As I waited for the results, I walked to the far end of the corridor and sat in the lounge area, trying to steady myself. Nearby, a couple of nurses pushed a medication cart down the hall, chatting idly. "Do you remember? Last Christmas her husband was here with her. He was so attentive." "Yeah, and now she's here alone. Typical men." Their words were nothing more than background noise, until one phrase sliced through my consciousness like a lightning bolt. "Last Christmas." My fingers tightened around my phone. My voice came out hoarse. "You said, last Christmas?" One of the nurses paused, blinking at me. "Yeah, I remember it clearly. Your husband was here with you. He even did a bunch of tests. I thought you two were planning for a baby. But, oh, did I say something wrong?" Her colleague immediately nudged her, coughing awkwardly. "You must be mistaken. A man that busy wouldn't have been here last year." "No, I'm sure I remember." Their voices faded as they walked away, but my mind had already gone numb, buzzing with a static hum. Jacob and I had only started discussing IVF 3 months ago. How could he have been here last Christmas? My pulse pounded in my ears as my fingers trembled, unlocking my phone. I quickly pulled up Sophia Bennett's social media and scrolled back to her posts from last Christmas. Seconds later, my screen froze on an old post. "I love kids, but my health makes it difficult. I wanted to try IVF, but Jacob said the risks were too high. He wouldn't let me go through that. He really takes care of me." The location tag? The very hospital I was sitting in. I stared at the post, my breath catching in my throat, as if an invisible hand had wrapped around my neck, squeezing the air out of me. "He takes care of her." The comments were flooded with praise. "Jacob is such a good man. She's so lucky to have him. The way he protects her. Truly one of a kind. A good man." A choked laugh escaped my lips, and before I knew it, hot tears welled up. That day, when the doctor told me I was pregnant, Jacob had lifted me into his arms, kissing my forehead over and over, his voice thick with emotion. "You did it. We're going to have a beautiful baby. Emily will be happy forever. Just like this. We'll never be apart. I'm going to be the best dad in the world." It had been the happiest day of my marriage. And now I finally understood. His joy wasn't because we had finally created a child out of love. It was because I had succeeded. Because now, Sophia wouldn't have to suffer through IVF. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer, shattering whatever remained of my heart into unrecognizable pieces. My phone vibrated suddenly, breaking the suffocating silence. A voice message from Jacob popped up on the screen. I stared at it, my finger hovering over the play button, hesitating. But in the end I pressed it. Baby, the gala's running late tonight. I swear I'll be home first thing in the morning. In the background, faint noises bled through the recording. Almost imperceptible. Almost. Because among them I recognized a laugh. A laugh I had heard too many times before. Sophia. A notification lit up my screen. Sophia had just updated her social media. The photo showed her lounging on an opulent sofa, one leg elegantly crossed over the other. Jacob knelt before her, pressing a reverent kiss to the top of her foot. His eyes filled with adoration. Caption: the price of being naughty. His punishment is giving me a foot massage. I stared at the screen, feeling as if every drop of blood had been drained from my body. This man who once swore to love me for a lifetime, was now kneeling at another woman's feet. A strangled sob clawed its way up my throat and I couldn't hold back any longer. Pulling the blanket over my head, I broke down in tears. My mind drifted, unbidden, to the past. To our very first Christmas together. Jacob had cut his business trip short just to meet me at the airport. Through the heavy snowfall, he stood tall, his suit dusted with flecks of white, his eyes impossibly soft as they met mine. He had reached for my suitcase, his voice warm and husky. Welcome home, Emily. Back then I truly believed we would grow old together. And then she appeared. Sophia. She had been one of the underprivileged students Jacob and I had sponsored before our marriage. He had always shown her a little extra care. But I never thought much of it. Until she became a permanent fixture in our lives. Christmas, he was there. Thanksgiving, he was there. Even at the company's annual gala, she was always there. When she began missing too many classes and her school threatened expulsion, I made the decision to cut off her sponsorship. That night, Jacob and I had our first real fight. The worst one we had ever had. She's just a girl with nowhere else to turn. How could you be so heartless? He had shouted, his fury shaking the walls of our home. I had been so overwhelmed, so devastated, that I fainted. When I woke up, Jacob was by my bedside, gripping my hand tightly, his eyes red-rimmed with guilt. I was wrong, Emily. Please, don't be upset. I had been foolish enough to believe he had finally seen reason. But now I understood. He hadn't given her up. He had just found another way to keep her in his life. Slowly, I reached for my left hand and slipped the wedding ring off my finger. My hands trembled. This ring had once been my faith, my promise, my future. Now it was nothing but a shackle. I walked to the trash can, closed my eyes for a brief moment, then let go. The ring hit the bottom with a sharp final clink. Jacob Carter, you broke every vow you made. So now this marriage is over. I returned home alone. The apartment was quiet, almost unnervingly so. The Christmas decorations still hung on the walls, untouched, but to me the place felt foreign, like a hotel I had stayed in for too long without ever truly belonging. Dragging my exhausted body into the bedroom, I didn't bother turning on the lights. I collapsed onto the bed, letting the darkness swallow me whole. I wasn't sure how much time had passed before I finally reached for my phone. The screen lit up, casting a soft glow in the dim room. I stared at it as if making one call could somehow rewind everything, set things back on the right path. I hesitated. Then finally I dialed Linda's number. Linda, is the translation position at the company still open? The silence on the other end lasted longer than I expected. When she finally spoke, there was an awkwardness to her voice. Emily, I'm afraid that position has already been filled. I exhaled slowly, my voice steady, almost indifferent. By whom? Another brief pause. Then reluctantly she answered. Sophia Bennett. A short, breathy laugh slipped from my lips, cold, detached, tinged with disbelief. Of course. Jacob had made sure his mistress was well taken care of. I see, I said lightly as if discussing the weather. Thanks for letting me know. The moment I hung up, the screen dimmed, plunging the room back into darkness. And then I heard it. The sound of a key turning in the lock. Jacob was home. He pushed the door open, stepping inside with an air of exhaustion. His head was bowed, his eyes fixed on his phone as he scrolled through messages, a faint smile playing at his lips. It was the most genuine expression I had seen from him in a long time. Because the only time Jacob looked that soft was when he was looking at her. But when he finally lifted his gaze and met mine, The warmth in his face vanished in an instant, replaced by mild irritation and confusion. "Why are you still up?" I sat on the couch watching him carefully, my voice even. "I heard the company hired someone new for the translation position. Sophia, I think? That name sounds familiar. Wouldn't happen to be that Sophia, would it?" Jacob's expression flickered, so fast most people wouldn't have noticed. But I did. Then just as quickly he recovered, letting out a light chuckle. "Oh, I wasn't paying attention. The secretaries handle all that." "Is that so?" I murmured, nodding slightly, but I never took my eyes off him. Jacob, pretending not to notice my coldness, stepped closer. "All right, Emily. Enough overthinking. It's late. You and the baby need rest. I know I've been busy lately and I should have been home more, but everything I'm doing, it's for you. For our family. Don't you see that?" His voice was gentle, his words perfectly crafted, painting the same tired story of "I work hard, you should understand." But what he failed to realize was that I was no longer the woman who would sit and wait for him to come home. I didn't reply. I simply stood up and walked toward the bedroom. A few minutes later, Jacob followed. He loosened his tie, slipped off his jacket, and climbed into bed beside me with the ease of a man who believed he still belonged there. The scent of his cologne mixed with something else, something faint but unmistakable. A perfume that wasn't mine. As he reached out, his arm instinctively seeking to pull me against him, my entire body stiffened. Then without warning, my stomach twisted violently. A wave of nausea slammed into me, raw and uncontrollable. I shoved him away, scrambling off the bed, and stumbled into the bathroom, barely making it before I collapsed over the toilet. Dry heaving. Tears blurred my vision as my body convulsed, racked with wave after wave of nausea. My fingers dug into the cold porcelain, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind me, I heard Jacob's footsteps approach. He hesitated, then knelt down. "Emily, are you okay? Maybe you've been pushing yourself too hard." His voice was laced with concern, but when he reached out to touch me, my body reacted before my mind could, flinching away from him as if his touch physically repulsed me. I squeezed my eyes shut, inhaling sharply, forcing myself to steady. Then without a word I stood, walked past him, and pressed the button to activate the air purification system on the AC. I needed to clear the air, because his presence made me sick. Jacob finally sensed something was wrong. He stood up, his sharp gaze sweeping over my pale face. His brows furrowed tightly and his voice dropped to a lower, coaxing tone. "You've been too emotional lately. You should get checked at the hospital. I'll go with you." I lifted my eyes to meet his, my voice calm, steady. "That won't be necessary." His concern, his affection, all of it was nothing but a performance, and I no longer needed it. Jacob hesitated for a fraction of a second before a flicker of irritation crossed his face. It was subtle but unmistakable. Just as he seemed about to speak, his phone rang. A familiar voice, dripping with deliberate flirtation, spilled through the speaker. German, sultry, unmistakably intimate. "Jacob, feeling adventurous? I'm waiting for you in the car." My stomach twisted, my fingers curling into a fist. Jacob lowered his phone immediately. The irritation on his face melted away in an instant, replaced by something far more relaxed. He shot me a quick glance, and for the briefest moment, guilt flashed in his eyes. But it was gone so fast I almost thought I had imagined it. "Emily, something urgent just came up at work. I need to step out for a bit, but I won't be long, okay?" His tone was gentle, laced with a false sense of reassurance. I curled my lips into a faint smile, my voice light. "Of course. I believe you." Jacob seemed relieved. He nodded, grabbed his coat and walked out the door, too hurried, too eager. He didn't even realize he had left his other phone behind. I exhaled slowly, my eyes drifting to the forgotten device lying on the couch. A burner phone. No saved messages, no distinct contacts, except for one function. It was synced to another phone's incoming calls. The screen lit up. An unknown number. But I knew exactly who it was. I reached out, picked up the phone and answered. A nauseatingly sweet giggle rang in my ear. "Emily, didn't satisfy you?" A brief silence. Then Jacob's voice. Amused and indulgent. "She could never compare to you." The breath was punched from my lungs. I didn't speak. I simply listened. listened as they whispered their shameless desires, listened as Jacob, my husband, humored her like she was the center of his universe. And then I calmly pressed record. Once the conversation ended, I saved the file to my personal phone. Then, without a second thought, I walked back into the bedroom. Jacob Carter, you really do underestimate me. By the time he returned home that night, I had already changed into my pajamas. I sat on the bed, flipping idly through a magazine as if nothing had happened. He walked in, loosened his tie, and approached me, reaching out to take my hand. A familiar scent clung to him. A perfume that wasn't mine. My stomach churned with disgust. Jacob must have felt my stiffness because he paused, his gaze lowering to my hand. His expression shifted ever so slightly, because my ring finger was bare. His voice dropped. Emily, where's your wedding ring? I glanced down at my own hand, rubbing my wrist absent-mindedly. My tone was casual, indifferent. Oh. I took it off during a hand treatment and forgot to put it back on. Then I lifted my eyes to meet his, a small, detached smile playing at my lips. It's just a ring, Jacob. You never wore yours either, did you? A flash of tension crossed his face. His Adam's apple bobbed slightly, but he had no response. We had never had a wedding. No vows exchanged before friends and family. No framed photos on the mantel. Just the rings. And even that he had refused to wear. He had claimed it was to protect me, to keep our marriage out of the public eye so I wouldn't be dragged into business politics. But now I saw the truth. It wasn't for my sake. It was for her. The room fell into a thick silence before Jacob finally reached for my hand again. This time his grip was gentle, almost pleading. I was wrong, he murmured. From now on I'll always wear it. I won't take it off unless you say so. Okay. His voice was softer than usual, his demeanor unusually subdued. He was trying, desperately, to pull me back. I merely watched him, my expression unreadable. Then slowly, I withdrew my fingers from his grasp, slipping just out of reach. Jacob Carter, you don't understand. Your apologies mean nothing to me anymore. And then, as if offering some grand solution, he spoke again. At the end of the month, let's have a wedding. My head snapped up. Jacob's expression was gentle, almost coaxing. The baby's still small. It's the perfect time for a ceremony. We can make it big. Let the whole company know. That way you won't feel insecure anymore. Insecure? A wedding. As if one extravagant event could erase years of betrayal. As if parading me in front of his colleagues could undo every lie, every whispered promise to another woman. I turned a page in my magazine, my voice even. That sounds nice. Jacob visibly relaxed, as if he believed I had been pacified. He pulled me into his arms, pressing a kiss to my temple. He thought he had won. He had no idea. Later that night, I heard him slip out of bed and step into the living room. Through the narrow gap in the door, I watched him lift his phone to his ear. His voice, though low, was crystal clear in the silence of the apartment. I just need to keep her steady for now. She's still carrying our child. Don't be mad, baby. I'll come see you soon, all right? The words shattered what little restraint I had left. This child, my child, was nothing but another one of his calculated moves. I stumbled back to bed, my hands trembling as I picked up my phone. My vision blurred as I tapped through the flight options. And then, without hesitation, I booked a one-way ticket to Germany. Jacob returned to bed, his hand brushing over my stomach in a mockery of tenderness. Let's get some rest, Emily. His voice was soft, deceptive. By the time he drifted off to sleep, I opened my eyes. Jacob Carter, you're going to get your wedding. And I'll make sure it's a day you'll never forget. Jacob continued coming home late and leaving early, while Sophia's social media never stopped updating. Each post, each photo was dripping with pride, every caption a deliberate declaration of victory. She flaunted the new jewelry Jacob had bought her. She shared photos of their candlelit dinners. She even posted a picture of the Christmas tree, the one he had decorated for her by hand. And then the latest update: to be loved is to be a true princess. I stared at the words on my screen, my lips curling into a faint, icy smile. I had long since lost interest in this twisted game, but she was too eager to gloat, too impatient to wait for the so-called win to be handed to her. 1 week before the wedding, she finally made her move. The doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Sophia standing there, her red lips curved in a smirk. her eyes gleaming with the kind of superiority she had long craved. "It's been a while, Emily," she purred, stepping inside before I could say a word, strolling around the apartment as if she already owned it. Her fingers trailed over the photo frames on the table, her voice tinged with mockery. "Still living here, I see. When you kicked me out back then, did you ever imagine that one day it'd be you watching me take over?" I shut the door behind her, crossing my arms, my lips tilting into an amused smirk. "Are you referring to the day you became the other woman?" Her smile froze. For a split second, her carefully curated expression cracked, revealing something twisted and bitter underneath. Then she recovered, letting out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You think you've won?" Her voice rose, dripping with cruel satisfaction. "Jacob is mine now. He holds me, spoils me, chooses me. And you're nothing but a discarded joke." She stepped closer, her eyes flashing with uncontained triumph. "You might still have his name, but I have his heart. And soon enough, even your child will call me Mom. Everything that was once yours will belong to me." Her nails dug into my arm, sharp and relentless, a physical manifestation of the venom in her words. Pain lanced through my skin, but I barely reacted. I was about to shove her off when suddenly the door behind me swung open. Jacob Carter stood there. His gaze flickered between us for a moment. Then, without a second's hesitation, he walked straight to Sophia. "Sophia." His voice was urgent, his presence immediately protective. He moved in front of her, shielding her from me as if I were the aggressor. As if I were the one who had done something wrong. Me. I was nothing but a bystander, standing a few feet away, watching a scene that felt like a cruel, distorted parody of the past. Then Jacob turned to me. His face was cold, his expression filled with obvious disapproval. "Emily, why are you still being so unreasonable?" His voice carried the weight of long-standing exhaustion, as if I were the one causing trouble, as if I were the one who couldn't let go. "Sophia has already been avoiding you, and yet you're still harassing her?" At that moment, I almost laughed. He hadn't even asked what happened. He hadn't noticed the red marks on my arm. He hadn't bothered to see me at all. Of course he wouldn't. In Jacob's world, Sophia would always be the fragile, innocent little rabbit. And I would always be the relentless, unreasonable wife who just wouldn't let go. He never once stopped to think about who the real victim was. Without another word, Jacob grabbed Sophia's hand and led her out the door, shielding her with his presence, with his loyalty. Even as he left, he had one last thing to say to me. "Emily, try to be kinder." Then the door slammed shut. Silence filled the room. I stood there, listening to their footsteps fade down the hallway, my mind blank. I was the one who had been pushed. I was the one whose skin bore fresh wounds. I was the one who was carrying his child. And yet she was the one he protected. He was the one he sided with. I had seen this scene before, years ago, when Jacob stood in front of me, shielding me from my stepmother's cruelty. She had demanded that I return to my hometown, find a stable job, and send my earnings to fund her beloved son's education. But Jacob had stepped in, his voice calm but unyielding. "Emily's future is mine to protect." That day he had helped me break free from the cage of my past. I had truly believed he would always stand in front of me, shielding me from every storm. But reality had proven otherwise. A man's promises were just sugar-coated lies, sweet for a moment, but in the end they always left a bitter taste. He had spent 2 years pulling me out of one prison, but only end up building another one later. And love. Love had turned into the biggest joke of all. I lowered my gaze to my arm. Red crescent-shaped marks marred my skin, the swelling just beginning to set in. Without hesitation I turned and walked to the bathroom, switching on the faucet. The icy water ran over my arm, washing away the places where she had touched me, as if that could somehow erase all the filth that had come with it. I looked up, meeting my own reflection in the mirror. For the first time, I noticed something strange about my own eyes. They weren't angry. They weren't hurt. They weren't even sad. They were calm. Too calm. Because for the first time I had no lingering hopes, no lingering pain. If he no longer loved me, why should I cling to the past? And more importantly, I didn't need his love anymore. 2 days before the wedding, Jacob Carter returned home. His expression was the same as always, calm, his eyes untroubled, his voice soft and warm, just like nothing had ever happened, as though Sophia's presence, everything that had unfolded that day, had been nothing more than a fleeting illusion. He walked over to me holding a small ring box, gently opening it to reveal a sparkling diamond ring. "Emily, stop looking at your phone, come try on the ring. How's the size?" His voice was gentle, almost apologetic, like he was trying to make up for something. I glanced down at the box, my fingers brushing its cold surface, but I didn't take out the ring. I simply closed the box with a soft click and replied in a steady voice, "If the size fits, then it's fine." Jacob's gaze faltered for a moment, then his brow furrowed. Clearly displeased by my indifference. "Emily, can you stop being so guarded?" He sighed, a note of frustration in his tone. "There's nothing between me and Sophia. Why do you have such a big problem with a young girl like her?" I smiled faintly and pointed to the inner band of the ring. "You've got the wrong one." Jacob frowned and looked down. His face went pale as he saw the engraving inside. The name was clear, Sophia Bennett. I watched his face freeze, his attempt at hiding the truth crumbling. Panic flashing in his eyes. This ring had once belonged to her. I didn't have the patience to listen to his excuses. Without another word, I turned and walked into the bedroom. Later that night, Jacob pushed open the bedroom door. His expression was complicated, tinged with regret. He walked over to me slowly, stood behind me and wrapped his arms around me, pulling me tightly into his embrace as if trying to merge our bodies. He leaned close to my ear, his voice low and tender. "Emily, I was wrong. We'll be okay from now on. Do you remember the wish we made on our first Christmas Eve together?" His tone was nostalgic, like he was trying to rekindle some lost memories we once shared. But I couldn't hear him. Back then, on a snowy Christmas Eve, we had made a wish to grow old together. But now this year he stood before another woman, promising her the same thing. "Jacob, how long do you plan on playing this act?" I closed my eyes and slowly drifted into sleep. The next day, there was only one day left before the wedding. Jacob woke up early and was busy in the kitchen. The pots steamed with freshly cooked food and the living room was filled with baby supplies. He walked over with a bowl of soup, smiling warmly. "Good morning. I bought a lot of clothes for the baby. Don't forget to check them out later." I took the bowl from him and nodded slightly, but my gaze lingered on my belly. He didn't notice my silence. Lost in his own fantasy, he stayed by my side all day talking about the baby, imagining its features. That night, a sudden downpour arrived. Outside, lightning struck and thunder cracked the sky, accompanied by a howling wind. Jacob tossed and turned in bed, clearly restless. He checked his phone repeatedly, his brow furrowed as though waiting for something. Finally, the familiar ringtone echoed. In an instant, he sat up, grabbed his phone and answered with such urgency that there was barely a moment's pause. He stood up, grabbing his keys, ready to leave. "Emily, I'll send a driver for you tomorrow. There's an urgent matter at work. I have to go handle it." His tone was rushed, and he couldn't even bother to hide it. Without even a glance at me, he turned and left the room. Not a single look in my direction. I watched his back as he disappeared into the night, hearing the car fade into the distance. Looking down at the neatly packed suitcase beside me, I knew it was time. I grabbed my suitcase and walked outside, stepping into the pouring rain, hailing a cab. Jacob's car sped past me just inches away. If he had glanced back for even a second, he would have seen me standing there in the rain, suitcase in hand. But he didn't. He didn't look back. Not once. I sniffled and wiped my face with the back of my hand, slowly raising the window on the cab. "Take me to the airport. Jacob Carter, I gave you so many chances. But you kept looking away. From now on, we're done." I clicked on the video and saw Jacob, dressed in a black suit, standing at the center of the crowd, his eyes fixed on the wedding car that was supposed to take me. But as the car door slowly opened, it wasn't me who stepped out. It was Sophia Bennett. She was wearing a pure white wedding dress, smiling as though waiting for everyone's blessings. Jacob's expression froze, shock flickering in his eyes. He moved forward slowly, seemingly paralyzed. Before he could say anything, the giant screen behind him lit up and a video began to play. It was a slideshow of photos I had personally edited. 1,000 photos, all showing Jacob and Sophia together. From the hotel to the yacht, from the restaurant to the airport, from New York to Paris. Each photo was irrefutable evidence of their affair. For a few seconds the crowd went silent and then everyone gasped. Some looked at Jacob, thinking he was orchestrating a grand surprise for Sophia. Others stood frozen, beginning to realize something was wrong. Meanwhile, Jacob's face had drained of all color, completely pale amidst the blessings surrounding him. After the video ended, Sophia's past was thoroughly exposed by netizens. She had been reported multiple times for plagiarism and academic fraud and had even been advised to drop out of school. Her history was mercilessly laid bare for the public to see. As a result of this wedding disaster, Jacob faced severe backlash from the shareholders. Carter Group's stock price plummeted. I logged off from the social platform and clicked on the surveillance footage at home. Sure enough, Jacob found the new wedding gift I left for him. A signed divorce agreement. Jacob stood in the middle of the room, gripping the paper tightly in his hands, his knuckles white, his eyes red. Eventually he collapsed to the ground, drained of all strength, repeatedly calling my name. But this time I would never respond. I turned off the surveillance, deleted the app, and officially cut ties with the past. Back at school, I quickly adjusted to my new routine. Besides teaching my students, I started traveling to places I had always wanted to visit but never had the chance. In the past, I had trapped myself in Jacob Carter's world, putting all my energy into a relationship that was never meant to fulfill me. But now I realized that loving myself was the most important thing. I was never just a housewife, only capable of cooking and cleaning. I had once been the girl who dared to chase her dreams. And I was now the woman who could stand on her own again. Just because Jacob didn't care, didn't mean I wasn't worthy of being cherished. As I adjusted to my work at the school, I unexpectedly ran into Ryan Mitchell, a senior from my college days, at a lecture. We quickly became friends, reconnecting after so long in a foreign land. We often went camping and jogging together. With his company, I finally learned to truly relax. Through his recommendation, I landed a new opportunity, working as a translation consultant at an international company. The company sent me to handle a project in South City, and to my surprise, the person I was coordinating with was a familiar face. Linda. I froze for a moment, staring at the woman before me, only realizing who she was after a few seconds. Linda was equally surprised, her face lighting up with joy as she pulled me to sit down. Emily, what are you doing here? I smiled and briefly explained everything that had happened recently. After hearing my story, Linda sighed softly. Emily, leaving Carter Group was the best decision you could have made. Carter Group is not what it used to be. After Jacob's wedding, he seemed like a different person. He disappeared for a month, and when he finally came back, he started pouring money into the jewelry business. I heard that the first piece he designed was named Amy. She paused, her tone now tinged with complexity. Everyone's guessing that it's named after his lover. The shareholders are in an uproar, saying Jacob's gone mad. I listened quietly, but there was no emotion in my heart. I no longer cared about Jacob Carter. Linda chatted with me for a bit longer before getting up to leave. I gathered my documents and prepared to leave for the day. It was Christmas Eve and the streets were bustling with holiday cheer. As I walked along the street, admiring the dazzling lights, I felt a rare sense of peace. The first Christmas after I left Jacob Carter, and it was the most relaxed Christmas I had in years. When I got to the door of my apartment, I took out my keys and was about to open the door when I noticed a small box lying on the ground. I furrowed my brow and bent down to pick it up. Just then, a trembling voice called from behind me. Emily, I finally found you. I turned around and, as expected, saw Jacob looking exhausted, standing in the middle of the snow-covered street. Snowflakes clung to his clothes, his hair was disheveled by the cold wind, and there was a thin layer of sweat on his forehead. He was panting, his eyes fixed on me with a deep, desperate fear, as though he was afraid I would disappear at any moment. But what he didn't know was that I had already disappeared. At least, in his world, I no longer existed. My first instinct was to shut the door. But Jacob was quicker. He rushed forward and grabbed my wrist tightly, pulling me toward him with such force that I nearly fell into his arms. His embrace was colder than the snow-filled night, his arms tightening around my shoulders as though he wanted to engrave me into his bones, never to let go. Emily. Emily. His voice trembled, almost breaking with a hint of tears. Emily, I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Please don't punish me like this. Without you I can't live. Warm tears slid down my neck. I turned my head away in disgust, my eyes cold. Why was he crying? It was him who betrayed me, and yet now he was the one asking for forgiveness? Is it really true that only after losing something do we begin to regret it? Let go. I spoke coldly, my voice devoid of any softness. Jacob, however, didn't move an inch. He held me even tighter, like a drowning man clinging to a piece of driftwood, unwilling to let go even if it meant going down with it. My patience had completely worn thin. I shouted in anger, "Jacob, let go of me." His body went rigid and slowly his hands released their grip. His face was full of reluctance, his eyes shadowed with despair, but in the end he let go. "Emily, I realize my mistake," he said hoarsely, as though afraid his voice would break if he spoke too loudly. "I swear I'll never contact Sophia again. I'll do whatever you ask. We'll redo the wedding exactly how you want it. Please, Emily." His voice dropped to a whisper. His eyes filled with pleading. "Please, come back with me." He spoke with caution, as though every word was fragile, as if one wrong step would make me vanish forever. But sadly he understood nothing. I took a step back, increasing the distance between us. "Jacob, did you see the things I left for you? I want a divorce." Jacob's face went pale immediately, his body swaying slightly as though he could barely stay standing. His pupils constricted, his voice rough and hoarse. "What? Divorce? Emily, don't joke about this. How can we divorce? Here's 8 years of our relationship. And you're saying we can just end it like that?" His voice grew increasingly frantic, his eyes wide with panic, almost bordering on hysteria. "You must not have liked the wedding I planned. I know I don't have your taste, it's all my fault. Just wait until you come back, we'll plan everything again. I promise this time it will be exactly how you want it. Please." He continued talking to himself, his words tumbling out in a desperate stream, as if his one-sided belief that we could go back to how we were would somehow erase everything. As though time could heal it all. I couldn't stop myself from interrupting him. "Jacob, what right do you have to talk to me about 8 years of love when you've cheated?" The moment I spoke, his expression cracked. A fleeting panic flashed in his eyes. He froze for a long time, his lips moving without sound before he finally stammered out, "No, it wasn't like that, Emily. I was just confused. But the person I've always loved was you. I never imagined we'd end up apart. It shouldn't have been like this. I thought after the wedding we'd have a home, children, and live a happy life like before." I scoffed, my gaze full of mockery. "Your happy life was a string of betrayals, wasn't it? Watching me foolishly love you, torturing myself with sleepless nights because of the pregnancy, while you comforted me afterward?" Jacob's face shifted violently, his eyes turning red, like a trapped animal with nowhere to run. "No. Emily, I know you're suffering, but if I don't handle the company's problems, how can I give you and the child a good future? I'm in pain too." The words hit me like a slap and I couldn't help but clench my fists, laughing coldly. He had already been exposed and yet he was still pretending? He still had the nerve to say he was in pain? How many of those business dinners were really business? For 3 years, you and Sophia interacted non-stop on social media, promising me every Christmas that you'd stay by my side. But the truth? One phone call from Sophia and you'd rush to be with her. For 3 years you traveled with her, took countless photos, but when it came time for our wedding, you didn't even spare time for a single bridal photo shoot. Last Christmas, you went with her to undergo IVF, but you stopped her because you were worried about her. I stared at him deeply, my words deliberate, each one like a cold jab. "And what about me? What am I to you? Am I just a tool for you to have children, or am I the obstacle to your love?" Jacob jerked his head up, eyes wide with shock, as though it was only then that he realized what I knew. His lips trembled, his throat working as though he wanted to say something but nothing came out. I watched his pathetic expression, a mocking smile playing at my lips. "The child I'm carrying was actually meant for Sophia, wasn't it? You thought I didn't know? You really think I'm that foolish?" Jacob stood there, trembling in the snowstorm, panic and despair flooding his eyes. But none of that mattered to me anymore. The day he cheated, our relationship died. I no longer loved him. "Emily, Jacob Carter's face grew even paler, his lips still trembling as though he wanted to defend himself but no words came. The snow fell around him, dusting his hair, his shoulders, enveloping him in a cold, pale shroud. His eyes were filled with disbelief, as if he were looking at a stranger. But the truth was, he was the stranger. Jacob, do you remember the promise you made to me on our first Christmas together? Jacob looked at me, his eyes empty, lost in distant memories. But I knew he had already forgotten. That year Christmas Eve, he spent all his savings to book a couple's restaurant. I never believed in love that lasts forever, but when he stood before me holding a bouquet of flowers, I couldn't help but start to dream. Maybe we would grow old together. Jacob, a man of steel, unromantic and practical, but always giving me an unparalleled sense of security. I once craved that steady feeling from him, never imagining that one day I'd marry him. But that night in the candlelight he kneeled in front of me, holding my hand with sincerity, and made a vow. Emily, please believe me. As long as I'm alive, I'll only love you. If I ever change my heart, let me go to hell. 8 years have passed. He was still alive and well. But he had long forgotten the vows he made. Jacob's Adam's apple bobbed slightly, and a trace of regret appeared in his eyes. But it was too late, I no longer cared. I exhaled softly, my voice calm as if I were discussing the weather. Luckily, you insisted on not having the wedding back then. Now, aside from you and Sophia, no one knows about our relationship. Otherwise, it really would have been a hassle. Jacob shot his gaze up at me, shock written across his face, as if he couldn't believe I was saying such things. Emily, how could you think that? His voice tightened, the disbelief seeping through as though I had just stabbed him with a sharp knife. I refused the wedding back then because the company was just starting and I was too busy. But now I can afford it. Come back with me and I'll arrange the wedding immediately. His eyes locked onto my face, desperation and urgency in his tone as he tried to salvage the situation. It's just a wedding. We can have as many as you want, and look, I even brought the ring. With that he pulled out a small red box from his pocket. Opening it, sure enough, there was a ring. A simple silver band with rough, uneven letters etched on the inside. It was from Christmas 8 years ago. Back then, Jacob Carter's company had just started, and we were both penniless, unable to scrape together even $500. But that year I was the happiest, because Jacob had spent 2 weeks handcrafting that silver ring, and gave it to me as a Christmas gift. The craftsmanship was crude and the initials were scratched clumsily, but I loved it. Later, when he became successful and proposed with a costly diamond ring, I still thought that simple silver band meant more to me. But now, it was in my hands again. Before I left, I had thrown it in the trash. I didn't know how Jacob had retrieved it, but when I saw it again I felt nothing. It was just a ring. I pushed his hand away impatiently, wanting to go back inside. But Jacob seemed to sense my indifference and immediately grabbed my arm, as if fearing I'd vanish the moment he let go. Emily, please come back with me. You're so lonely in this strange city. Whatever you want to do, I'll make it happen. I almost laughed at how absurd it sounded. A cold smile curled at the corner of my mouth as I spoke, dripping with sarcasm. Strange city. I slowly turned to face Jacob, the man whose face I once knew so well. Jacob, I forgot to tell you. I spent 3 years in Germany during college. You didn't really think I didn't understand what you and Sophia were talking about on Christmas, did you? Jacob's pupils dilated in shock, and the color drained from his face, leaving him deathly pale. He stared at me in disbelief as if his last mask had been ripped away. I forgot. His voice was faint, uncertain, as if he couldn't believe his own words. Emily, those things I said were lies. I only said them because I was afraid Sophia would go to you and say something. I shook off his grip in frustration, my voice as cold as the winter snow. What's a lie? Your promises? Your marriage? Or your true love? Jacob fell silent, his mouth hanging open, his chest still in the cold night air, his breath frozen in the bitter chill. I didn't look back at him as I turned toward the apartment. But just as I was about to step through the door, Jacob's voice suddenly dropped, thick with suppressed anger and regret. But Emily, we've been together for so long. We've had a baby. Who else would want you? My hand froze on the door handle, my fingers ice cold. I slowly turned back to look at him, my gaze colder than ever. This was the man I had loved for 8 years. But now his face seemed like that of a stranger. Utterly terrifying. Jacob saw me turn around, and a flicker of hope appeared in his eyes. as though he believed he had finally swayed me. He smiled gently, his voice softening. Emily, be reasonable. We can still be happy together. I won't abandon you. He stood in the snowstorm, smiling warmly, like he was granting a favor. But all I felt was a bone-chilling cold. This man was no longer the one who had knelt before me on Christmas Eve, promising me a lifetime of love. He had become a selfish, controlling monster, someone who believed betrayal was his right. I took a deep breath, preparing to tear off the last shred of his disguise. But before I could, a low male voice suddenly rang out from behind me. Is there something you need from my girlfriend? I turned around to meet Ryan Mitchell's gaze. Ryan strode up to my side, positioning himself firmly behind me, his eyes coldly fixed on Jacob Carter. I've already called the police, he said, his tone calm but filled with undeniable conviction. Emily has me, and she's always been an independent, capable woman. She'll be fine with or without anyone. Jacob's face turned a deep shade of green, his angry eyes drilling into Ryan, as though he wanted to burn a hole right through him. I'm Emily's husband, he ground out, his voice low with suppressed fury, his knuckles turning white. Who the hell are you to call her your girlfriend? Ryan chuckled darkly, a chilling aura surrounding him. Husband. He raised an eyebrow, casually patting the file in his pocket, his tone relaxed but laced with threat. Doesn't matter. I've already found Emily a divorce lawyer. Everything you've done, you're lucky it's not enough for 10 divorces. Jacob's expression twisted in fury. Veins bulged from his forehead, and his rage threatened to snap what little control he had left. His fists clenched tight, his gaze murderous, and in the next instant his arm shot up as if to strike Ryan. But before he could come any closer, the sound of sirens tore through the quiet night. Several police officers rushed forward, swiftly restraining Jacob and dragging him away. He struggled violently in the snow, his eyes wide with despair. Emily. But I just stood there, coldly watching as he was taken away, unmoved. Ryan gently patted my shoulder, offering a small smile before turning to follow the officers to handle the aftermath. The night deepened and the snow gradually ceased. I sat on the swing in front of the apartment, gently swaying. The cigarette's ember flickered, casting a faint red glow in the dark. My phone buzzed nonstop. I opened the message and it was from an unknown number. Emily, do you think you've won? I'm pregnant. It's Jacob's. I scoffed and quickly turned off my phone. Was it pitiful? Maybe. Was it laughable? Of course. She had wagered everything, only to gain a man as hollow and deceitful as Jacob. She thought she had won, but in truth she was standing exactly where I once did, repeating my pain. In the end she would lose much worse than I ever did. Just as I was lost in my thoughts, Ryan's voice broke the silence. What are you daydreaming about? I snapped back to reality and saw him walking toward me, holding a cup of warm chocolate milk. He casually sat down on the other swing, rocking it gently as a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Thanks. I raised an eyebrow and took the milk, smiling at him. Thanks for what? Ryan flashed a slightly mischievous grin. Thanks for letting me take advantage. I just told the police you're my girlfriend. I couldn't help but laugh softly. Ryan had called me his girlfriend to help me get rid of Jacob. But the part about him finding me a lawyer? That was real. At this point I couldn't accept being Jacob Carter's wife any longer. With the lawyer's help, the divorce proceedings went smoothly. Jacob Carter hadn't been around for a long time, especially after Sophia Bennett's pregnancy scandal. I thought he'd disappear for a lot longer. But when I returned home to finalize the divorce, Jacob showed up again. He stood there looking utterly exhausted, his face dark and drawn, eyes shadowed with a bruised, lifeless look. In just a month it seemed like he had aged 10 years. The once confident and charismatic Jacob Carter now appeared as a shell of himself. Emily. His voice was hoarse, his gaze full of desperate pleading. Can you give me a little more time? I'll fix everything soon. He stared at me as if I were his last lifeline. But I simply brushed past him coldly, my voice flat, as though I were stating something unimportant. Don't make me hate you too much. Jacob's face drained of color and his lips quivered slightly. In the end he just managed a bitter smile, standing still as he watched me walk away. Months passed and Jacob's life turned out to be nothing like he had imagined. His relationship with Sophia, which he thought would be perfect, was fraught with constant tension. The pregnancy was more demanding than he'd expected. And Sophia's mood swings were increasingly difficult to handle. What had once seemed like a fresh start quickly became a constant battle. Arguments over trivial things, long silences, and an overwhelming sense of regret that Jacob couldn't shake off. He missed the stability he'd once taken for granted, the comfort of having someone who truly understood him. And now he had no one but Sophia, who seemed more distant than ever. Occasionally, Jacob would show up outside my apartment, his eyes desperate, as if he still believed he could win me back. But each time, I looked at him with indifference, unmoved by his apologies or the hollow promises he continued to make. His words had lost their weight, and his regret was no longer something I could sympathize with. As for me, I had found a new direction in life. I had taken the time to rediscover my own dreams, to rebuild what I had lost. I was no longer the woman I had been with Jacob, lost in his world, living for someone else. I was Emily, strong and independent, learning to love herself again. And in that process, I had slowly grown closer to Ryan. It wasn't just the convenience of being with someone who cared for me. It was the connection we had, the way we understood each other without needing to speak. His presence felt like home, like the beginning of something real, something that wasn't built on lies or broken promises. And then there was my child. When I made the decision to raise my baby alone, people warned me how difficult it would be. And they weren't wrong. There were sleepless nights, exhausting days, and moments of overwhelming doubt. But every time I looked at my child's face, I knew I had made the right choice. This was a love that was pure, unwavering, untainted by betrayal or regrets. I built a life for us, balancing my career and motherhood with a strength I never knew I had. I no longer needed anyone to validate my worth. I had already proved it to myself. My child didn't grow up lacking anything because I gave them everything I had. We were happy in a way I never could have been in a loveless marriage. I realized that the pain I had endured wasn't a curse, but a lesson. I had allowed myself to be consumed by someone else's choices, by his love that was never truly love. But now I could see clearly. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was complete on my own. And if love were to find its way back into my life, it would come naturally, without demands or compromises. Looking ahead, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. There was no more dwelling on the past, no more trying to fix what was never mine to fix. I would no longer allow anyone to define me, and that was the greatest freedom I had ever known. Whatever came next, I was ready.